I sat at my desk, staring at the blinking cursor on my laptop screen. Outside my apartment window, the city buzzed with life cars honking, people rushing home from work, the comforting hum of a world that didn't care whether I was single or married. But inside my mother's world, that was a different story. My phone buzzed with a message from my older sister, Melissa. Mom says dinner is at 6. Don't be late. Wear something nice. I rolled my eyes. That was code for dress like you have your life together, which, in Diane's eyes, meant anything but my usual jeans and sneakers. Growing up, my mother had always been obsessed with appearances. She thrived on the picture-perfect family image dad in his suit, my siblings in their coordinated outfits, and me. Well, I was always the odd one out. I never quite fit into her mold of what a daughter should be. Melissa had married young and had 3 kids, a house in the suburbs, and a perfectly curated Instagram life. My brother, Mike, had followed suit, complete with a high-powered job and a wife who looked like she walked off a magazine cover. And then there was me, Eliza, the independent one, the career woman, as my mom liked to say, with an exaggerated eye roll, as if success without a husband was some sort of tragic condition. At 30, I was doing well for myself. I was a graphic designer with my own thriving freelance business, living in a cozy apartment in the city, and, unbeknownst to my family, engaged to Jordan, my best friend turned partner. But I kept my relationship under wraps for one simple reason: my mother. The moment she caught a whiff of something significant happening in my life, she'd find a way to insert herself, twist it, and somehow make it all about her. Family gatherings were always the same. My parents' house, a beautifully maintained colonial-style home that practically screamed, "We have it all," was the usual venue. Mom would flit around in an apron, acting like the quintessential hostess, while delivering passive-aggressive jabs in between serving courses. "Oh, Eliza, I saw this great book on dating after 30. I should have bought it for you." Or, my personal favorite, Melissa and Mike both had their weddings at 27. I guess everyone finds love at their own pace. Eventually. I used to get defensive, try to explain that I was happy on my own terms. But over the years, I learned it was easier to let her think I was too busy finding myself than to engage in a conversation that always left me feeling smaller. Tonight's dinner, however, was different. My gut told me something was up. A week ago, Mike had let it slip over drinks that Mom had a plan for me. "She's worried about you, Eliza," he had said, swirling his beer bottle awkwardly. "Thinks maybe if she sets you up with someone respectable, you'll finally settle down." I had laughed at the time, but the thought gnawed at me. Mom had pulled plenty of stunts before, introducing me to nice men at family functions, sending me articles about successful women who found love after 35, but calling an actual family meeting just to discuss my single status, that was a new low. I glanced at the clock and sighed. Might as well get it over with. By the time I pulled into my parents' driveway, the house was already filled with the sound of laughter and clinking dishes. The usual suspects were there: Melissa with her husband and kids, Mike and his wife, and, of course, my mother, standing in the center of it all like a queen overseeing her court. "Eliza, you made it!" Mom's voice was sugary sweet, but her eyes were scanning me up and down, assessing my outfit. "That sweater is casual." I forced a smile. "Good to see you too, Mom." Dinner started off as expected. Small talk, updates on everyone's lives, Melissa going on about her youngest's latest piano recital, Mike talking about his latest promotion. And then, as the plates were cleared, my mom clapped her hands together, a familiar glint in her eye. "All right, everyone," she said, standing up. "Now that we're all here, I think it's time we had a little discussion." I braced myself, already knowing what was coming. Mom smiled, too wide. "Eliza, sweetheart, we're all just concerned. You've been so focused on work, and we think it's time to start thinking about your future. You're not getting any younger, you know." And there it was, the intervention disguised as a dinner. I took a deep breath, fingers tightening around my wine glass. She had no idea what I had up my sleeve. I sat at the dinner table, my fingers tightening around my wine glass as my mother's words hung in the air like an unwelcome guest. "We're just concerned about you, sweetheart." Concerned. Right. That was Mom's favorite code word for disappointed. Melissa and Mike exchanged glances across the table, clearly aware of what was coming next. They had probably been briefed in advance, coached on how to handle their lost cause of a sister. Mom continued, her voice dripping with practiced sweetness. "You know, Eliza, it's not just about work and career. Life is about family. And I just think it's time you started thinking about yours." She placed a hand over mine as if this was some heartfelt intervention instead of a thinly veiled ambush. I forced a tight smile. "Mom, I'm doing just fine. I have a great life, and I'm happy." Diane's lips twitched, and I could see the disappointment flash across her face before she masked it. "Of course you think you're happy, dear. But wouldn't it be wonderful to share your success with someone special?" Dad, usually content to stay out of these discussions, cleared his throat. "Your mother just wants what's best for you, Lizzie." There it was, the team effort. I glanced around the table, noting Melissa's smug little smile, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her wine glass. Mike, to his credit, looked uncomfortable, but he wasn't about to risk Mom's wrath by siding with me. His wife, Jessica, sat silently beside him, offering me a sympathetic smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Mom wasn't done. She never was. "So, I thought it might be helpful if we set up a few introductions for you." She beamed. "I invited Pastor Greg's son to dinner next week. He's a doctor, you know. Such a nice young man." I nearly choked on my drink. "Wait! You what?" Melissa piped up. "Come on, Eliza. It wouldn't hurt to meet him. You're not getting any younger, and it's not like your dating life is exactly thriving." She laughed, and Mom joined in, clearly enjoying the little tag team act. I set my glass down carefully, taking a deep breath to steady myself. "You do realize I don't need help finding a date, right?" Mom sighed, leaning back in her chair like she was exhausted by my stubbornness. "Sweetheart, we're just trying to help. I mean, we all settled down at your age. Don't you want the same happiness?" I could feel the heat rising in my cheeks. I was done. Done with the judgment, done with the pitying looks, done with the whole spectacle they'd arranged for tonight. They had no idea that I wasn't the pathetic, lonely daughter they imagined. I leaned forward, fixing my mother with a calm, deliberate stare. "Actually, Mom, I'm seeing someone." The room fell into stunned silence. Mom blinked, and for the first time in my life, I saw genuine surprise flicker across her face. "You're... what?" Melissa's wine glass nearly slipped from her hand, and Mike sat up straighter in his seat, suddenly interested. I smiled sweetly, enjoying their reactions. "Yes, I have a fiance." I let the word hang in the air, watching as Mom's expression shifted from shock to something else, panic. "Fiance?" she repeated, clearly struggling to process the information. I nodded, suppressing the satisfaction curling in my chest. "His name is Jordan, and we're engaged." Melissa's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water, while Mom's face turned an alarming shade of pink. She clearly wasn't expecting this. Mom recovered quickly, plastering on a too bright smile. "Well, isn't that wonderful? Why haven't we met him?" I shrugged. "I wanted to be sure, and now I am. In fact," I checked my watch. "He should be here any minute." And just like that, the tables turned. The room was still reeling from my announcement, the tension so thick I could practically taste it. Mom's forced smile looked like it physically hurt her, and Melissa sat frozen, her usual smugness replaced with wide-eyed shock. Mike, bless him, seemed caught between relief and morbid curiosity. I took another sip of my wine, letting them stew in their stunned silence for a moment longer before the inevitable interrogation began. Mom recovered first, smoothing her hands over the tablecloth like she was trying to regain control of the situation. "Well," she said, her voice strained with forced enthusiasm. What a surprise. I can't believe you've kept something this important from us, Eliza. When did this happen? I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. A while ago. Mom's eyes narrowed slightly. A while ago? And you didn't think to mention it? Melissa finally found her voice, leaning in with a smirk. Are you sure this is serious, Eliza? I mean, you haven't exactly been the relationship type. She shot a glance at Mom, and they both exchanged one of their infamous looks. I bit back the urge to snap and kept my expression neutral. Yes, I'm sure, Melissa. We've been together for almost 2 years now. Mom gasped. 2 years? Her eyes widened with a mixture of disbelief and something else betrayal. You've been engaged and we didn't even know. Before I could answer, the doorbell rang. The sound cut through the tension, and I saw Mom straighten like a general preparing for battle. She smoothed her blouse, then turned to me with an expectant look. That must be him, she said, rising to her feet. I'll get it. I moved faster, intercepting her before she could grill Jordan at the door. I'll get it, Mom. I walked briskly to the entrance, taking a deep breath before opening it. Jordan stood there, looking effortlessly charming in his usual laid-back way, dark jeans, a crisp button-up, and his signature easy smile. His dark hair was slightly tousled, and his green eyes twinkled with amusement. You weren't kidding about your mom's ambush tactics, he murmured as he leaned in to kiss my cheek. I let out a small laugh. Welcome to the lion's den. We walked back into the dining room together, and all eyes were on him. Mom's gaze raked over him, assessing every inch, while Melissa's eyes practically screamed suspicion. Dad, ever the silent observer, gave Jordan a polite nod. Everyone, I said, gesturing to Jordan. This is Jordan, my fiance. Jordan smiled warmly, extending his hand. Nice to meet you all. Mom hesitated for a fraction of a second before taking his hand. Well, Jordan, it's about time we met you. Melissa leaned in with a fake sweetness that made my teeth grind. So, Jordan, she drawled, what do you do? Jordan, completely unfazed, grinned. I'm a software engineer. I run my own company. Mom's eyebrows shot up in surprise, clearly scrambling to adjust her narrative. Oh, your own company? Well, isn't that impressive? Melissa looked less impressed, her expression souring. So, like, tech stuff? I jumped in before she could ask anything condescending. Jordan's company specializes in cybersecurity. He's worked with some major firms. I shot Melissa a look that dared her to say something snide. Mom, desperate to reclaim control, pressed on. And how did you two meet? Jordan didn't miss a beat. We met through mutual friends. I knew right away Eliza was something special. He glanced at me with a smile that made my heart flutter, but I knew Mom wasn't buying it. Mom's lips pursed. And you're engaged. She said the word like it left a bad taste in her mouth. Jordan nodded. Yes, we are. I proposed a few months ago. Mom's eyes flicked to my hand, noticing for the first time the ring on my finger. Oh, she murmured, visibly flustered. I suppose I just didn't expect this. I arched a brow. Why not, Mom? Because I'm perfectly capable of finding love without your interference? Melissa snorted into her wine glass, and Mom shot her a warning look before turning back to me. Sweetheart, you know I only want what's best for you. I folded my arms. Funny. What's best for me always seems to align with what you want. Silence stretched across the table, and I saw Dad shift uncomfortably in his seat. Mike cleared his throat, trying to ease the tension. Well, congratulations, you two. Jordan smiled, raising his glass. Thanks, Mike. That means a lot. Mom wasn't done, though. So, have you set a date yet? Her voice was tight, calculated. I met her gaze head on. Not yet. We're taking our time and enjoying the engagement. Mom's expression flickered with irritation, but she forced another smile. Well, don't wait too long. Weddings take a lot of planning, and Jordan cut in smoothly. Don't worry, Diane. We've got it under control. I could almost see the steam coming out of her ears. Dinner dragged on with Mom throwing pointed questions at Jordan, probing for any flaw she could exploit. Every answer he gave was polite but firm, refusing to let her rattle him. At one point, Melissa leaned over and whispered, "Guess this means you won't need Mom's help finding a nice man anymore, huh?" Her tone was dripping with sarcasm. I smiled sweetly. "Nope. I think I've got that covered." By the time dessert rolled around, it was clear that Mom was struggling to keep up the facade. She kept trying to insert herself, to make it seem like this was all part of her grand plan, but no one was buying it. When Jordan excused himself to take a call, Mom wasted no time. She leaned across the table, her voice low. "Eliza, are you sure about this? Marriage is a big step." I set down my fork and looked her in the eye. "Yes, Mom, I'm sure, and you're just going to have to accept that." She opened her mouth to argue, but before she could, Jordan returned and draped an arm casually around my chair. "Everything all right?" he asked, sensing the tension. I smiled up at him. "Perfect." Mom forced another tight smile. "Well, I suppose congratulations are in order." I grinned. "Thanks, Mom. And don't worry, you won't have to set me up anymore." Mom's expression soured ever so slightly, and I knew I had won this round. Dinner was over, but the tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Mom sat stiffly at the head of the table, her lips pursed in a way that told me she was really trying to hold back whatever biting comments were bubbling beneath the surface. Jordan, ever the picture of calm, sat beside me, his hand resting lightly on my knee in silent support. Mom tapped her fingers against her wine glass, her gaze flickering between me and Jordan like she was piecing together a puzzle that didn't fit her expectations. "So," she began, her voice sweet but with an unmistakable edge, "Eliza, I'm curious. If you've been engaged for months, why haven't we heard anything about it? No phone call? No family announcement?" I smiled, taking my time to sip from my water glass before answering. "Because, Mom, I wanted to enjoy it without the pressure. You have a tendency to get involved." Melissa snorted from across the table, barely hiding her smirk. "That's one way to put it." Mom shot her a glare, but quickly refocused on me. "Sweetheart, you make it sound like I'm meddling, when all I've ever done is try to guide you. I didn't expect this." She gestured vaguely toward Jordan, her voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. Resentment, maybe. Jordan leaned forward, his tone polite but firm. "Diane, I understand it's a surprise, but I love Eliza. We wanted to keep things to ourselves for a while, and I think that's fair." Mom's expression hardened, and for a brief second I saw the panic lurking beneath her carefully composed facade. She wasn't in control, and she hated it. "Of course, dear," she said with a saccharine smile. "But family should be involved in these decisions. Marriage isn't just about two people, it's about merging lives, about tradition." And there it was, the guilt trip, wrapped up in a shiny bow of faux concern. I put my fork down and sat back, staring at her. "Tradition, huh? Like how you pressured Melissa to get married before she was ready, or how you pushed Mike into law school even though he wanted to be a teacher." Mike shifted uncomfortably in his chair, avoiding eye contact, and Melissa's smirk faded. Mom's face flushed. "Eliza, that's not fair." "No," I interrupted, my voice steady but firm. "What's not fair is how you've treated me like I'm incomplete without a husband, like my career, my happiness, my choices don't mean anything unless there's a ring involved." I turned to Jordan and gave his hand a squeeze. I chose to wait because I wanted to do things on my terms. And you know what? I'm happy. Mom sat there, stunned, and for the first time in my life, I saw the truth in her eyes. She wasn't concerned about me. She was afraid that I didn't need her anymore. But instead of backing down, she doubled down. "I just don't want you to settle, Eliza," she said, her voice taking on that martyr-like tone she always used when she wanted sympathy. "You deserve the best, and sometimes you don't see what's right for you." Jordan let out a small laugh, but it wasn't amused. "Diane, I assure you, Eliza hasn't settled. We support each other, and she's the best thing that's ever happened to me. Mom's eyes darkened, her fingers tightening around her glass. Well, that's very sweet, Jordan, but marriage is a long road. Are you sure you're ready for the responsibility? I nearly laughed at the desperation in her voice. Mom, for God's sake, stop! You don't get to control this. Melissa leaned in, sensing blood in the water. You know, Mom, maybe it's time to let Eliza make her own choices. She's done pretty well for herself so far. I shot Melissa a grateful glance, and for once, she actually looked like she was on my side. Mom opened her mouth to argue, but before she could, Jordan reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small white envelope. Actually, Diane, we wanted to give you something. Mom blinked, confused, as she took the envelope. With trembling fingers, she pulled out the card inside. It was an invitation. You are cordially invited to the wedding of Eliza Harper and Jordan Miller. She stared at it, her face pale. You already planned a date? I nodded, barely able to contain my grin. We did. A small ceremony, just close friends and family. Mom's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. For the first time in a long time, I had left her speechless. Melissa chuckled, leaning back in her chair. Looks like you don't need to set her up anymore, Mom. Mike finally chimed in, raising his glass awkwardly. Well, congratulations. Jordan smiled, lifting his own glass. Thank you, Mike. We're really excited. Mom, however, sat frozen, her fingers clutching the invitation like it was a time bomb. And you didn't consult me? I shrugged. No need. I'm happy, Mom. That's all that matters. She looked around the table, searching for an ally, but for once no one jumped to her defense. Even Dad, who usually stayed out of it, simply patted her hand and said, You should be proud of her, Diane. Mom swallowed hard, forcing another fake smile. Of course, sweetheart. I'm happy for you. But I could see it in her eyes. This wasn't over for her. And that was fine, because for me, it finally was. The ride home was quiet, the hum of the car filling the silence between me and Jordan. I stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past, my mind still replaying every moment of dinner like a scene from a cringe-worthy reality show. I can't believe you actually handed her the wedding invitation, I finally said, breaking the silence. Jordan chuckled, one hand on the wheel, the other resting comfortably on my knee. It was the perfect moment. Besides, she needed to hear it from us, not through some family grapevine. I sighed, sinking back into my seat. She looked like she was about to faint. She'll survive. He squeezed my knee reassuringly. More importantly, how do you feel? I thought about it for a moment. Lighter. Free. For the first time in years, I had stood my ground without letting my mother's expectations weigh me down. I didn't just defend my choices, I owned them. I feel good, I admitted with a small smile. Like I finally took back control. Jordan grinned. Good, because you did. When we got back to my apartment, I kicked off my heels and collapsed onto the couch with a groan. Jordan sat beside me, tugging me into his arms. You handled tonight like a champ, he murmured against my hair. I smiled into his shoulder. I guess it helps that I've been preparing for this moment my entire life. For days after the dinner, things were surprisingly quiet on the family front. No frantic phone calls, no passive-aggressive texts, just blessed silence. Part of me wondered if Mom was secretly plotting something, but a bigger part hoped that maybe, just maybe, she was finally letting go. Then, on a rainy Thursday afternoon, my phone rang. Mom. I hesitated, staring at the screen before finally answering. Hi, Mom. Eliza? Her voice was oddly subdued, none of her usual high-strung energy. I've been thinking about our dinner. I braced myself. Oh? A pause, then. I suppose I might have overstepped? I blinked in surprise. Was that an admission of guilt? Well, yeah, Mom, you did, she sighed. It's just, you've always been so independent. I guess I thought if I didn't push, you'd never settle down. I softened a little, recognizing the thinly veiled fear in her voice. Mom, I know you want what's best for me, but you have to trust that I know what's best for me, too. Another pause. Then, to my utter shock, I'm proud of you, you know, even if I don't always show it. I swallowed the lump in my throat. Thanks, Mom. And Jordan? He seems like a good man. He is, I said, smiling, and he makes me happy. A long pause followed, then, I suppose I should start planning what I'm going to wear to the wedding. I laughed, tension finally melting away. Just promise me you won't try to turn it into some grand event. She chuckled lightly. I'll try, dear. After we hung up, I sat there for a moment, absorbing the conversation. Jordan walked in, noticing my expression. Was that your mom? Yeah, I nodded. She actually said she's proud of me. He grinned. See? Progress. I sighed, resting my head against his chest. Yeah, and you know what? I think everything's finally going to be okay. I wasn't naive enough to believe my mom would suddenly change overnight, but for the first time, I felt like she was starting to accept me for who I was, not who she wanted me to be, and that was enough. 6 months later, I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing down the lace of my wedding dress. The small ceremony we had planned was exactly what I wanted, intimate, simple, and free from the overwhelming expectations I had once feared. Jordan walked up behind me, his hands resting gently on my waist. Nervous? He asked, grinning at me in the mirror. I smiled back, not even a little. And I meant it. Mom had surprised me. Though she still had her moments, she'd finally learned to step back, mostly. Today, she was sitting quietly in the front row, beaming with an expression that, for once, didn't feel forced. Even Melissa had been supportive in her own snarky way, and Mike had promised to keep Mom in check. As I walked down the aisle, I realized something. I had finally built a life that was mine, on my terms. And for the first time in a long time, I felt completely at peace.